This is part 4 of the Craftsman King Seeley 100 Drill Press Rebuild series. If you haven't seen part 3, click the link at the top of the screen. In this video, we will be cleaning parts with Simple Green, we will be derusting parts with citric acid, and we will be polishing the column. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff, and welcome to my shop. We got a lot to cover, so let's get to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is put most of the parts in a plastic bin and soak them in Simple Green for about 24 hours. I'm not going to put any electrical parts in the Simple Green, and I'm not going to put any of the panels that have graphics on them in the Simple Green. And about half the time, Simple Green will strip off the paint. So if you want to preserve paint, then just clean stuff with Simple Green, but don't soak it in Simple Green. After about 24 hours, I'll pull the parts out, rinse them off, and then they're going to go in a citric acid bath. And this is the citric acid bath. You just mix up about a tablespoon of citric acid per gallon of water. So after I rinsed those parts off, the Simple Green did not pull the paint off of the base or the head on this drill press. And you can see this paint is actually in really good condition. But I'm going to repaint it, so I'm going to strip it. And I'm going to use Citristrip here to strip it. I like this stuff because it's non-toxic and I can use it indoors. It's not going to make my house smell. So you just apply it all over the area that you want the paint to be stripped off. And then I'm going to wrap it with cellophane or saran wrap or plastic wrap or whatever you want to call it. And I'll let it sit for about 24 hours. And I've had really good results with this Citristrip. When I first started doing drill presses, I was stripping them with very dangerous chemicals, and I watched a couple of test videos where people have been using the Citristrip, and I decided to give it a try, and I'm amazed at how well it works. So like I said, you just coat everything in the Citristrip, and then we'll wrap it in saran wrap. And all this does is keeps the Citristrip from drying on the product and allows it time to work. And I don't always have to do this. Most of the time, or I guess about half the time, the Simple Green will pull the paint off of this stuff. And then when I pull it out of the Simple Green and rinse it off, I can just use a wire brush and scrub it, and it'll be back down to bare metal. But paint on this was really well adhered. So next, I just use a pressure washer. This is just a cheap electric pressure washer you can get at Walmart or whatever. And I rinse the parts off to get the Citristrip off of them. And this can be messy, but it beats having to scrape them. And these are those same parts and the column all soaking in citric acid now. So once the parts are pulled out of the citric acid, they get rinsed off. And then I'm going to dry them off. I'm just going to towel dry them. The faster you can do this, the better. Because most of this stuff will start to build up surface rust real fast after you've pulled it out of the citric acid and rinsed it off. There may be a couple of parts here that you don't recognize. That's a tilting motor mount from a 150 drill press. And I'll discuss all those parts at the end of this video. All this was in the citric acid. So, and I forgot to mention, when we're putting stuff in citric acid, I'm not going to put anything in the citric acid that is Zamek or aluminum or some cast alloys. The citric acid can have a weird effect on those, but the steel parts are just fine to put in there. And it'll remove the rust. 24 hours in the citric acid and they will be rust free. So here I am just coating these parts in WD-40. I'm not a big fan of WD-40, especially for long-term use, because parts will rust. WD-40 has water in it. There's other penetrating oils I like to use for long-time preservation, but just to keep these parts from rusting until I get an opportunity to really clean them up, that's what I do, is I just coat them in WD-40. That way they can sit in these bins for several days and not start to rust. So everything that's on the green towel on the other side of the table there is stuff that's going to get painted. So, or it's something going to a different project. So it's not going to get the WD-40 on it. But everything on the white towel that I'm working on right now, except for that base, will get coated with the WD-40. So obviously the base and the head. Look at how good those turned out. I mean, not a speck of paint left on them. So that's kind of how I break down the drill press and the parts. And so everything that's going to get painted on the right side of the table there, and it's not going to get any kind of oil on it. Otherwise, that'll affect the paint. So I'll put a link to one of my other videos that I go over how to construct this poor man's lathe. It's real simple. It's just a drill and a couple of casters. These were some newer casters that I use, and they decided to die on me halfway through this project, so I had to go back to the older casters that I have been using for over a year now. But all I do is I'm going to sand the column. So I hit it with the wire brush first to knock off any loose debris on there. And then I'm using, this is 100 grit sandpaper, and I'll work my way down the column and all the way back, and then I'll go to 150 and do that all the way up to 220 grit. And that's all the dry sanding that I do. And then I'll start to wet sand it. Like I said, I'll work my way all the way back towards my starting point. And I'm moving pretty slow here. I'm not applying a whole lot of pressure or anything like that. I used to do this all by hand, but the orbital sander really makes it easier for the dry sanding. As you can see, that column already looks pretty good. It's got a nice satin finish to it. When you get to about 220, you could stop right there if you don't want to polish a column. But I polish my columns, so I'm going to continue all the way with the wet sanding and then actually use some polish on it. So with the wet sanding, I start with 320. I go 400, 600, 800, and then 1,000 grit. And what I do is I go about 10 inches on the column, and then I'll re-wet the sandpaper and then go 10 more inches and keep doing that. And I'll go all the way down the column and come back with the same grit. And then I rinse the column off with a rag, and then I go to the next grit. And if you don't rinse between grits when you're wet sanding, you're never going to get that chrome-like finish that you want. So this will take a couple of hours to do one column. And here we are with 1,000 grit. And we're coming back towards the camera now. And after we get done with the 1,000 grit, we'll rinse the column off again, and then we're going to dry the column off. We'll pick up all the rags that are sitting under it. As you can see, this is a messy process. I get this stuff all over me, all over my floor, my table. But the results are worth it, in my opinion. Like I said, we'll just rinse it off. Be careful when you go over those casters. Every once in a while, that rag will get stuck between the caster and the column and yanked out of your hand. But no big deal. Then we'll dry it off. So for polish, I use Mother's mag and aluminum polish. This stuff is magic. You can get it at auto parts stores. But I'm just going to apply the polish to the column with a microfiber rag. And I'll apply it to the entire column. But literally, this stuff works magic. I have no idea how it does what it does, but it does it. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see that yellow rag. That's a piece of... well, to be honest, I think it's a piece of ShamWow. But I take those and cut them into strips, and that's what I use to buff the column. And it looks pretty good here, but when I come back down on the clean side, on the back side of that rag, it's got a chrome-like finish at that point. So again, I'll go all the way up it, and then I'll come all the way back down the column. Just absolute magic what it does. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to do a little buffing where the wheels or the casters were hitting the column. Make sure we gotten pretty much all that mag and aluminum polish off of the column. And then I'm going to coat the column in a paste wax. I like Johnson's paste wax, but really any paste wax, floor wax would do fine. You can't get Johnson's anymore. They stopped making it. But we're just going to apply the wax to the entire column. And then we'll come back and buff it with a microfiber rag. Too easy. There is some damage to this column down there on that end, right where I'm kind of stopping and going back and forth. But it's not bad, and that's the head end, so it's going to be the gap area between the head and the table. I can turn the column so that I won't even see it. Lastly, once we're done with all of this, I'll go ahead and coat the inside of the column with some WD-40. And I haven't mentioned it until now, but this is a keeper drill press for me. I'll be keeping this. This will be my personal drill press. I'll end up selling probably the floor standing 150 that I currently have. So everything on this drill press is important to me, and how it looks and runs is important to me. And that's why I'm doing a lot of the stuff that I'll be doing with this drill press in this rebuild. Normally I would just rebuild the drill press and then sell it or give it to somebody, but this one, it's mine. Next, we're going to talk about parts. So this drill press came with this pulley, which is incorrect, and I'm replacing that pulley with the other pulley that's on the table, this one. So this is the correct pulley. It's 5 inches and 2 inches there. So that's what I'm going to do. This is the quill lock, and because on the 52 and 53 models they painted the chrome parts, all these chrome parts look horrible. So I'll be replacing that with that Atlas version of a quill lock, and the hub, which is in terrible condition. Now I can sand that. I can sand it and polish it, and it would look almost like chrome. But I have an extra hub, extra rods, and extra knobs, and I like the red knobs better than those black knobs, so that's what I'll be using on this drill press. I mean, those red knobs just look better all around. Next, if you recall, there was a spiral retaining ring inside the head casting, which is incorrect. The correct one is there. That's the outer retaining ring that the entire spindle pulley assembly is supposed to rest on. So I'll be replacing that. I haven't found a replacement feed tension knob yet, so I may end up having to just sand that one and polish it. This is the feed stop bracket. Again, it was chrome at one point, so they painted it and it looks horrible. So I have a replacement chrome one that I'm going to use. Now, these are the feed stop collars that were on this drill press, and they were just something that the previous owner had fabricated. These are the correct feed stop collars for this drill press. And so we'll be replacing those. But luckily, the 100 series drill press, the feed stop rod is a 5/8 by 18 thread. So I've actually got some nuts that I could use if I didn't have that. So this is the original 100 series motor mount, and I'll be replacing it with a 150 series tilting motor mount. Tilting motor mounts just make the belt changes easier. So that's what we'll be going with. And of course, this drill press did not have a chuck key, so this is a correct Jacobs chuck key, self-ejecting. And then I found a replacement headband. This drill press did not come with one, and I wanted one, so I was able to locate one. And that's going to wrap up this video. I hope you found it informative. If you did, please like and subscribe. As always, I appreciate the support, and I will see you next time.